debate. What does this have to do with being an old folks' home? There are a lot of old people in the Senate? There are. But you know what? Anybody can lean against a desk that they don't realize or forgot. These are not stable desks. They're not nailed down and toppled down. And quite frankly, she recovered pretty quickly. I was a little shocked at that, to be honest with you. Someone should be, if I were being honest, I'd say, nice recovery, okay? But this, again, is where conservatives are going to be spending most of their energy tweeting and going out there. They're not going to be talking about so many of the vital issues we talk about. And then we wonder why we have such a dumbed down populace within even the MAGA movement. Okay, you and I both know there's a lot of people in the MAGA movement that they couldn't keep up with this show.
No.
And you know why?
Not at all.
Because so many of the people that are broadcasting today are catering to the lowest common denominator. And yet my people perish, without knowledge. Knowledge, the acquisition of truth, what's tied back to the Bible, a biblical worldview. Maybe we stop spending so much time ridiculing people like Elizabeth Warren for tripping and spent more time talking about biblical truth and bringing that to bear on the issues of the day. We could actually win. Leo?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason they do this and focus on stories like that is because it, as you said, attracts the lowest common denominator. And
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Russians definitively hacked the election.
Russia did hack the election.
No doubt. The Russians hacked the election.
Yes, Russia hacked the election.
Fact, Russia hacked the election.
President-elect Donald Trump still not sounding convinced that Russia hacked the election.
The president does not want to come to terms with the fact that the Russians hacked the election.
President Trump says he still wonders if the Russians hacked the election.
If you can get him to accept that Russia hacked the election, see if you can get him to accept who won the Civil War.
If he admits it, it casts a shadow on his victory over Hillary Clinton.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Let's be clear, Russia hacked the election.
Definitively, Russia hacked the election, and Russia is doing it again now.
Election-related cyber hacking.
Cyber hacking of U.S. elections. Cyber hacking of the election.
Russia was cyber hacking the election.
Russia was cyber hacking the election.
The CIA, the FBI, NSA.
All of these intelligence organizations.
17 intelligence agencies.
All conclude that Russia hacked the election.
If we find out that Donald Trump just theoretically was colluding with Russia while they were hacking the election, that is completely impeachable.
This dossier alleged a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian effort to hack the election.
The director of national intelligence, the head of the National Security Agency, the head of the FBI, all of these intelligence experts saying Russia hacked the election.
Welcome back to Truth Thursday. The Rob Maness Show's live on World YouTube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, we must challenge the narrative of lies and rebuild the real America, folks. When the history of the 4 years of the Biden administration is finally written, it's going to be a riveting story of government propaganda, disinformation, like what you just saw there is incredibly popular today. These campaigns that are supported by the corporate media, it's going to involve the infiltration of Maoist Marxism of every American institution and the recognition that our education system from pre-K to graduate schools are the problem that enabled it all. Now, I do have a guest scheduled for today. It seems like there may be some technical difficulties, but hopefully I'll be talking to Jeremy Ryan Slate about what we are seeing and how, with the reelection of the Trump administration, we might just have a chance to defeat these efforts to destroy freedom and prosperity. Jeremy is the host of the Jeremy Ryan Slate Show, which studies the highest performers in the world. He studied literature at Oxford University. He holds a master's degree in early Roman Empire propaganda from Seton Hall University. And his podcast was named the #1 podcast to listen to by Inc. magazine, as well as top 40 under 40 by Podcast magazine. And I don't think Jeremy's with us yet, so we're just going to continue. Folks, what you just saw there is a montage of all of the media disinformation campaign. They're projecting the government's disinformation campaign is what they're doing there. And it was shown to be an example of how propaganda is used and how the press in this country now, just like it was in the Soviet Union, just like it is in communist China today and other totalitarian governments, our vaunted First Amendment press was allowed itself to be used to push government disinformation. And that government disinformation was the Russiagate hoax that we now know with the release of all these classified documents, starting with DNI Tulsi Gabbard's releases a little bit over a week ago, and the two others that she has since released. Just this morning, Senator Grassley from Iowa released a classified report that his office did on the Russia hoax. And it has revealed that, contrary to what the media would tell you, and you can go back and find all these videos and stories, they haven't been smart enough to try to memory hole them yet. But they're on video because most of the stuff has been pushed by those outlets that you just saw there. People like Jake Tapper and CNN, MSNBC, even some Fox News, and then the ABC, CBS, NBC propaganda outlets. But anyway, this new document today that was just declassified and released by Senator Grassley this morning shows one of the things that confirms one of the things that this show and others like me and like my friend Matt Couch, who has been sued over the Seth Rich investigation, who is the DNC staffer who is thought to be believed to have actually released the DNC emails, the 20,000 emails to WikiLeaks, that is kind of at the core of this issue. So it's my understanding that the guest is ready. Jeremy Ryan Slate, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Hey, Colonel Maness, thank you so much for having me. I apologize. I was in the wrong place.
Hey, not like that doesn't happen to us every once in a while, my friend. I appreciate you making the time. This was a short notice schedule anyway. And thank you so much for making the extra effort. Well, you missed the opening clip, I think, which was a montage of all of the media outlets parroting the disinformation campaign from the government about the Russia hoax and that Russia hacked the 2020 election or the 2016 election. I get them confused. There's been so much stuff going on, and part of this show, I want to talk to you, give you a chance to talk about from what you learned in your study of Roman propaganda, and just talk about this because the narrative lie is now falling apart, and I think we have an opportunity as Americans to rebuild the real America now that this narrative is shattering and the truth is finally coming out and those kind of things. So just update everybody on. In the audience, Jeremy, on your background, especially in the propaganda piece, a little bit. Sure. Tell them a little bit about yourself before we move too far on.
Yeah, so I have a company called Command Your Brand. We are a PR company that places our clients on podcasts. I'm also a Roman Empire expert, funny enough. I got my master's degree in the propaganda that Augustus Caesar used to convince people he was God. And then nobody cared about it until the last few years when it's popped up in news and media. And I've seen a lot of the same things start to happen again. So it's been very interesting. I've also had a show myself since 2014. And I've been exploring a lot of what's happening in the world out there.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you, we talked in 2023. As a matter of fact, I came across a clip from me on your show in 2023. Was the last time you and I talked, either on my show or yours, about this propaganda, because it was really at the height of what we just saw in the opening clip of that montage. We were seeing it in real time. Now that we got past that, and you see the narrative starting to shatter quite a bit, what can we learn from the Roman propaganda efforts that we could possibly apply as this moves forward in time now, and we see it both chatter, but also more importantly, what do we need to be on the lookout for to keep it from being resurrected? Number one, and then eventually solve this issue and get back to the truth.
Well, I think the thing we have to worry about is the same thing that Romans had to worry about, and that's a system that perpetuates itself, right? If you look at emperors would change once we go from the Republic to the Empire, but emperors would change every few years, and during the 3rd century, they change every few months. But what wouldn't change would be the power structure, which was the Praetorian Guard and the military apparatus. And I think what we have here is a little bit different, right? I wouldn't say that we're run by the military, maybe we'd be better off if we were, but really we're run by a security state. We're run by an intelligence state. So I think what we have to take a look at, Colonel Maness, is we've seen this has happened. We have evidence now that it happened, but can we actually change how the system is continuing to perpetuate itself, right? Because that is the same system you would see in the time of the Roman Empire. Is if anyone spoke up, if anyone got out of line, well, they wouldn't live very long. And the Praetorian Guard was notorious for killing Roman emperors. They can link about 17 directly to deaths by the Praetorian Guard. There's a lot more that were questionable of what happened to emperors in relation to the Praetorian Guard. So I think the thing we have to look at is, how do we reform this system that continues to perpetuate itself? And the thing is, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I haven't been too happy seeing what's been coming out of the FBI even recently. I've hoped Kash Patel and I hoped Dan Bongino will be able to do more, but at the same time, how broken is that system too? So I think just changing the person at the head might not be the thing that fixes the system. So in order to really change where we're at, I think we have to figure out how to fix that system, or it's going to continue to perpetuate itself.
Yeah, you kind of just touched on one of the things that I've been thinking about. I'm glad you brought up the FBI and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. I mean, that's a small microcosm. The FBI is not really that big, but it's very strong. And it was strengthened by legislation like the Patriot Act, where it really combined intelligence capability with law enforcement capability at the federal level. And it has really good funding. It hires really smart people, whether you agree with them ideologically or not. Sure. That is the case. They're really smart people. They're very capable people. And I think it's an indicator that the lack of seemingly progress from our perspective out here in the hinterlands is how strong that bureaucracy within just the FBI still is. I'll be honest, I talk to former FBI agents frequently, and even today, they will say things like, well, some of these whistleblowers that came out, their records weren't very clean. Maybe that's the reason why they're not being rehired, and those kind of things. And they don't mean to be deep state-ish about it, but it's just the culture. It's the culture in the FBI, and you see similar things in the Department of Defense and those kind of things. So we have a major challenge in that the self-perpetuating system represented by the vast bureaucracy of unelected officials.
Well, from their perspective, they only have to outlast Trump for another 3.5 years, right? So it's like they don't have to last that long in order to continue to perpetuate the system. So I think what we need to take a look at is real reform. And I'll be honest with you, Colonel, I don't know what that is. You have more political experience than I do, so maybe you have a better idea of what that might be. But I thought that we would see more change by changing the FBI, but I guess at the same time that shows us how broken the system is, that one person or two people from the top have not been able to really turn it yet.
Yeah, and they are turning it in many ways, but they started out, it looks like to me, based on the public, just on that specific organization, that they started turning its focus back away from, you remember we used to talk about the focus on MAGA grandmas and MAGA grandpas from January 6th, and we were concerned about, well, what bad guys are getting through the system by not being looked at, and Bongino and Patel have both a concerted effort to turn the organization back to like child trafficking, human trafficking, counter drug, with helping the deportations of the criminal element of the illegal aliens and helping Tom Homan in that regard. So we have seen that change, but what we haven't seen, which is a concern of mine in that particular part of that, is any change towards the January 6th perpetrators. I'll call them perpetrators because there were January 6th perpetrators, not just in the FBI, but the DOJ, the legal system, and those kind of things that hurt a lot of Americans. And I'm not talking about the people that broke the law and were violent and those kind of things, but the people that did things like walked in the Capitol and had no idea they were breaking the law. We put people like that in prison for years over this before the pardons. And the pardons are great, and I'm glad the president did it, but that can't replace the broken lives. And there's a lot of broken lives out there. And I was hoping to see more activity in that direction once the guys got their feet on the ground, and we just haven't seen that much in there. And I know it's a tough problem. It's a tough nut to crack. But we got to take a commercial break, Jeremy. When we come back, we'll see another clip, and this clip will not be focused on the media part of the propaganda effort, but the government's propaganda effort. And we'll continue this discussion with Jeremy Ryan Slate of Command Your Brand. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
There's always been a concern that if you have a national police agency, it will be weaponized by the president to serve a political agenda. And that was a fear from the beginning of the creation, when both the FBI and in 1947, when the CIA, was authorized. Everybody, Republicans, Democrats, were deeply, deeply concerned because they said, these national police agencies are really a feature of totalitarian regimes like the Stasi and East Germany, the KGB in Russia. And we have had a problem from at least the 1960s of the FBI being weaponized against political dissent. And then there were reforms in the 70s and 80s to a series of FBI directors after Hoover's death that tried to depoliticize the agency, but it now is heavily politicized. We saw the FBI legitimizing Russiagate, the propaganda against Trump. And I'm not a fan of Trump's, but I don't think that the FBI should be deployed against any presidential candidate, whether I agree with that candidate or not. And the Chris Steele file and all of these things that had now, we know that the Durham report has shown us that a lot of those are untrue. They were propaganda that was abetted by people within those agencies. And both the CIA participated too. You had 60 CIA agents or high-level officials signing a public letter that said that the Hunter Biden laptop was a fake, was Russian disinformation, when they either didn't know or they knew it was a lie.
Yeah.
And that's something that we should not tolerate.
Do you think they should be punished for this?
Yeah, of course they should.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. And we're talking about how do we challenge the narrative lies and rebuild America, the real America. And that clip right there was from 2023, before people get all upset that thinking that RFK Jr. is saying he's not a fan of Trump today. That was from 2023. But it's important to show that and listen to that man specifically, because his uncle and his dad both, it is known now, CIA involvement, FBI involvement in their deaths and the activities surrounding those deaths. It's now known because the documents have been released. And my guest today is Jeremy Ryan Slate of Command Your Brand, who's also got a master's degree in Roman Empire propaganda. It's one of the reasons why I like having him on when we're talking about this breaking news that we're having today. And Jeremy, RFK Jr. there kind of laid out a good history lesson about our own FBI and our CIA. This is not a new problem for us. I mean, I think it's the first time that we have documentation that a president of the United States, like Barack Obama did, pulled his senior intelligence and legal team together and gave direction to find the Russia collusion thing by creating it in this intelligence community assessment he directed after December 9th, 2016. That's new. But the agencies themselves being politicized, either indirectly for sure, is not a new problem.
Well, I think the thing we've run into as well is we've known for a long time that both the CIA and the FBI are willing to commit crimes to further whatever purpose that they have for themselves as well. I don't know. I'm reading a book right now, One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1 by Whitney Webb. And she talks about a operation called Operation Underworld in I think it was the 1920s and 1930s, where the FBI was working with organized crime, and the precursor to the CIA, the OSS, was doing a very similar thing. And they were willing to allow organized crime members to commit certain crimes with their help, as long as they got the information and blackmail and sort of things that they needed. So I think the problem is, even back to its roots, the organization is corrupt as anything. So we have to, I don't know what the right solution is, but it has to be purified in some way, if that makes sense. I don't even know if that's the correct phrase, but if it's a law enforcement organization, it should be that. It shouldn't be something that's, I don't know if you followed Dinesh D'Souza's work, but his recent film Police State, where they're willing to go to certain lengths to get people to commit a crime so they can then arrest them for said crime. So they're spending a lot of their time and attention on things that are criminal rather than catching actual criminals. And I think that's become the problem with this organization. It is so politicized because it's like, what law are they going to enforce? What crime are they going to create? And it's not an organization that's looking for the best interest of the American people.
Yeah, and I think one thing added to what you just said there is the intelligence linkage now. With the Patriot Act, after 9/11, we saw the weaknesses in the FBI, and some people chose the solution to create it as an intelligence agency too, and make it part of the intelligence community. much more than it ever was. I mean, it's always had some intelligence aspect to it, even foreign intelligence, but mostly domestic and that kind of thing. But from a law enforcement perspective, not a national defense perspective. And now that it's so firmly linked with the CIA, I think we see the challenges with that and the ability to corrupt the system and use it for political purpose.
Well, it becomes like, oh gosh, what was that Tom Cruise movie where they were going after pre-crime? I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's a similar concept, right? Because after 9/11, President Bush wanted the FBI to do more in intelligence, so we didn't have something like 9/11 happen again, which, you know, is a good purpose, but the actual action it creates and the changes in the agency it creates is now they're observing for crimes everywhere, right? Rather than where they should be. And I think this is the problem that happens is it's an agency that's gone past its actual mandate of what it's supposed to do. And that becomes a real problem, right? That becomes a real problem that it's not looking for enforcing crimes. And the thing that concerns me as well, Colonel Maness, is if you look at the recent discussion around Barack Obama, there was a Trump tweet, I think about a week ago, where he had said that basically Obama would have immunity for what occurred. And it's like, well, then what's the point of even knowing all this if we're not going to actually hold anyone accountable, right? So it's like there's a getaway from jail free card as long as you have the power at the time you do what you're doing. Well, then it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, look, I'm not an attorney. I can't make a judgment call or give an opinion on whether I think the president is right in what he was talking about. But I will say that there is a solution. There is a accountability solution. It's in the Constitution. A president can be impeached. Anybody that's held elected office can be impeached even after they leave office. And in the president's case, it's laid out there: treason. Of course, you have to meet the specific definition in there, but seditious conspiracy and sedition itself are also crimes that could be looked at for impeachment, and then he could be convicted in that. And after that, that's fair game for the judicial system, in my opinion. And the other issue that President Trump's case was all about his core functions. When he's operating his core functions. Well, it's not a core function of any president of the United States, in my opinion, to tell his senior leaders to create a situation from whole cloth and use the power of their government agencies to perpetuate that false narrative, and in order to first try to keep a president from taking office, and then B, try to remove him from office. That is not a core activity of a president of the United States under the Constitution, while pieces of it taken individually might be. So I question whether Obama has immunity in this case, because even though he maybe have been acting as president of the United States in what seems to be a core function, intelligence and those kind of things, but the activity he directed, the conspiracy he erected, he started it, and the perpetuation of that, even beyond his presidency. I think there's a lot of room there to look at indictment, especially for seditious conspiracy and sedition.
Well, I think you have to look at what this does to our system too, and this goes back to the Roman Empire comparison, because in this case, it's okay to commit a palace coup as long as you can keep the power, right? And I think that's what you have to look at, because what that does to our system, then will the Republican Party do the same thing, right? Like I would hope not, but will they do the same thing? And that's how a system gets destroyed, right? Is if both parties get to a point where they're willing to do what they have to do to take the other party out, as long as they can continue to have power. Well, that's how a system gets destroyed. And to the point we're up now, that hasn't happened on the Republican side. But when the Democrats have had power, it has been something that's been highly politicized. And that is when a system no longer continues to exist. And you look at Rome's 3rd century, they went through almost 30 emperors in a less than 100-year period, because each one would try to complete the palace coup. And if they could do it, they would continue to hold power. And I think that is a very bad situation to be in. Because what then happened for the Romans is, well, military power was what was funding each person, so they would pay the military more, fueling inflation. They needed more soldiers, so they wouldn't worry about immigration, and they brought people in from the borders. So these are real problems. And you look at what the Democratic Party has done. There's been a lot of talk around, who was actually voting in the past election or even in 2020? Were these American citizens voting? And there were a lot of questions in places like Nevada and Arizona and New Mexico. So we've done the same things throughout history. And once you get to a party that will do anything to complete the palace coup and continue to have political power, well, you have very little of a system left anymore.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You mentioned the military side of it. One of the last bastions of an institution in the United States that was, I won't say it was immune, but it was still cocooned off from partisanship, was the Department of Defense and our armed forces for a very, very long time. But with the first the Obama administration, but really under the Biden administration, they really pushed the throttle up on that with the Marxist indoctrinations, even going into the service academies. And we're going to talk about a service academy in the last segment of this, because there's breaking news about one of them associated with Marxism and indoctrination and those kind of things. But the DOD was infested and really infected with that during the Biden administration, all the way into our, like I said, our service academies, our boot camps, our accessions through Reserve Officer Training Corps, and then within the service itself. And you saw indicators of it with the drag queen story hour being allowed at base libraries in front of kids by commanders and those kind of things. The whole forcing people to use pronouns to bend the knee to trans ideology. And these are all critical theory, Marxist critical theory aspects of this indoctrination. And that needs to be addressed too. We got to take another break, Jeremy. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about this, but I want to bring in the Maoism that is also affecting all of our institutions now. And I just spoke a little bit about that with the Department of Defense and wokeism and trans ideology and the like. But it goes much, much deeper than that. And we'll be right back with Jeremy Ryan Slate.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
This is something you can do. You can awaken other Americans that this is what's happening in our country, and that if we don't stop it, we have only one place to look at what our future looks like, and it's China, which is no freedom. Here's an example. I saw a video where it shows somebody and they're in their 15-minute city block or whatever, and to leave the block so the government can track you, you have to walk through a turnstile. But to do that, you have to look into a facial recognition camera so it knows you left. It knows where you're going. And when the person looked at the camera, it said, smile. And until he smiled, it didn't open. That's selling your soul. That is total control over you. You can't leave your apartment building till you smile for the government. So now we have all of these things going on with all this, shoplifting, because it's not a crime in these cities on the West Coast, right? So I just saw a video from Portland, Oregon. People have just been going into Walgreens or some store, and they just clean the shelves out. So what solution did our genius synthetic totalitarians in Portland come up with? Well, at first they put everything behind lock bars, right? Well, that's really inconvenient. Somebody has to come out. It might be dangerous. They have to unlock it just so they can get out, some contact solution so you can go buy it or whatever. That's no good. They put a facial recognition camera on the door, and until you looked in it and it recognized your face and put you in the database that you're the one that went in the store, knew who you were, the door won't open. That's a solution. That's a new solution to the problem. You don't even need police. They can't even get in the store if they have a bad social credit system score. And you're going to say, wow, those cameras, or the people in Portland did, said those cameras are a solution to this problem we have. Because we couldn't possibly go back to the police, because the police are racist. We have to speak up about these things. We are on the cusp. We have to speak up. We can no longer pretend we don't know what's happening. This is a cultural revolution. We are halfway through it. America and the West are being put through a cultural revolution based on neo-Marxist identity politics as the new Marxist theory. As we said, Maoist Marxism based on American characteristics. So there are two questions before us as a people. Can we stop a cultural revolution? And if so, how? For my part, I think America can stop this.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Today's show is about all the breaking news, challenging the narrative of lies and rebuilding the real America. And you just heard from Dr. James Lindsay there. He and I have discussed this. Dr. Lindsay's discussed it with my guest today, Jeremy Ryan Slate, on his show, too, about the Maoist cultural revolution. You heard me talk about Marxism and its indoctrination through different critical theories into even the Department of Defense now. And Secretary Hegseth is doing his level best to eradicate that from the Department of Defense, because that's the last institution to be infiltrated in this country, in my opinion. And Dr. Lindsay's very clear there. It's even a problem. It's a bigger problem that can be addressed by the American people, and it's got to happen at the local level. That camera system he just talked about was put in place by a city government. I guarantee it. And Jeremy, welcome back to the show. You've done extensive study of the Maoist cultural revolution and how it applies here in the United States of America. If you'd have asked me 5 years ago, even, and said, do you think that there's Marxism indoctrination in the school system and all the institutions in the United States of America? I'd have said, are you crazy? But it's very evident now, isn't it? I mean, this is just a piece of everything we've just been talking about just during this show. The government overreach, the intelligence linkages, the law enforcement, the president of the United States setting up a conspiracy to take down an incoming president in one way or another, no matter what, and the media helping him. It's all part of this, isn't it?
Well, it definitely is, and actually, I think back in 2023, you were actually on my show discussing this. So it's this has been something that at least yourself and myself have been noticing for the last few years, and this is where I think the pandemic, in a lot of ways, was actually a good thing. Not looking at all the terrible things that happened to people, but for the information that came out. Right? If parents had not been observing their kids having school on Zoom, a lot of this stuff would not have come to the public light. And that's why you had angry parents at school board meetings and things like that. But it is very similar in a lot of ways to what happened in Maoist China. And in a cultural revolution, you want to create things that are good groups and that are bad groups. And you would have the good communist identities in China that were called red identities, and you'd have the identities you did not want to be, which were called black identities. And that's very similar to what's happened here, where you see this a lot with celebrities. They want their kid to be trans because they're in an acceptable group. They're one of those specific red identities. And it's really interesting to me when you see how people have behaved in the public sphere. And it started to become, in a way, where it's almost unacceptable for you to say something about it, right? Like for you to say, I don't agree with that ideology, or I don't like that thing, because you become a hateful, terrible person. And when I look at it, I don't recognize the public sphere we have out there now versus what we had even 5 years ago. I will say, and I don't know if you've seen these American Eagle ads that have been out in the last few weeks. They had some very funny memes about it. One was I have. They put Alex Jones in a like a jean tuxedo, which was a funny one. But the thing that's interesting about this, because they're showing side by sides of the ads now versus the ads 2 years ago, you're actually seeing Americana come back in these ads, which is quite interesting to me. So I think we've, especially, I think the Trump election was this, and I mean the second Trump election was this turning point where enough people rose up and enough people voted where now the culture has started to shift back to where it's supposed to be. Because now people have gotten angry enough where they're not going to allow this to happen. I don't feel great about where the political system is headed right now. As I know there's been a lot of pushback, as we talked about earlier, from the FBI and other areas. But our culture, in my opinion, is going back to what it should be, to a very, we're all equal, sure, but there is an American culture, and we're not supposed to permit these disgusting things that, basically allow pedophilia and other things to be normalized in the public sphere.
Yeah. Do you think that the large part of the success, even to get Trump reelected in this unusual second term, I mean, this is only the second time in our history that this has happened with a president separated by a gap, and it's never happened that one was had a mugshot taken, and there was so much lawfare against him that he had to go through a trial. Was actually got a sham conviction in a civilian trial in New York City, and all kinds of craziness. But the way we are able to communicate today and remove ourselves from the propaganda stream, both in the commercial media and the government's disinformation campaigns, their propaganda. Do you think that has helped enable us to start this breaking free, to restart things like Americana being acceptable in ads? Although there's a lot of Nazism going around as far as screaming about it, screaming about it anyway. So there's still half the country that's not quite convinced that we should have Americana.
Well, I think it turns out when you're on the left, anything you don't like is Nazism, is what I've heard. But I think the thing that's interesting is in my opinion, the only thing that's changed this is, free speech on places like X, on places like Getter, on Truth Social, on Rumble. Though, in my opinion, those are the only things that have shifted the culture. Because what had happened is they had put us in these boxes, and this goes back to what James Unsley was talking about earlier, this idea of a social credit score. You were put in a box and you couldn't say certain things. And if you did, you were either removed from the platform or silenced from the platform. So then what starts to happen? Well, people start to self-censor because they want to be able to be permitted on these platforms. So with the ability to have freer speech, I'm not going to say it's totally free, but freer speech on these other platforms, that has been the single thing that has turned the tide, because those things were working when there was total control. I know even YouTube in a lot of ways has started to move back. And things that I couldn't post 2 years ago, I can now talk about, which is quite interesting. They even they changed. I know it's a simple thing, but they changed their ruling on profanities, that you can actually swear and still be monetized now, which is interesting. So you're starting to see this more of the ability to talk differently than what the acceptable cultural zeitgeist was before, because it was a very small percentage of people that was deciding what the rest of us could talk about. And I think now it's giving people courage, seeing how many people also think what we've experienced over the last several years is insane.
Yeah. You mentioned YouTube. This show streams to YouTube, and I've lost every channel except for my personal one, and I'm streaming it to them just to test them, to see if we can get away with things that we weren't able to get away with. That's why I lost channels, as they came in and said, "Oh, you talked about vaccines, and you talked about medical stuff, or you talked about disinformation from the government. We're going to cancel you." They actually went back 3 years to look at my shows and find them, quite honestly. Well, we've got a hand up in the audience. Let's go ahead and take that question real quick before we get to this last break. Go ahead. Shell is our host over there. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Wib, sir.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Mr. Slate. So this question, Mr. Slate, draws on your expertise in public relations. How do you deal with what I call cluster munitions? For example, the Steele dossier, it was proven false. But everything within the Steele dossier is still by the Democrats considered true. And so each individual thing in the Steele dossier has to be individually addressed.
Was there more to the question, or is that the whole question?
That was the question: is how do you deal with that? Where one cluster munition, I'm calling it, creates a huge number of issues.
So I think that the thing you have to take a look at is, well, number one, you have to, I know it's a cluster munition, but you have to hit each one of those things head on. And if they're false, you have to show exactly how they're false. You overwhelm them with facts, and you overwhelm them with facts in every area possible, right? Because you have to fill that void, because you're allowing them to fill that void. So you have to take on each one of those things head on. You know, so what I would have done really wasn't done in the mainstream. You know, I would talk about exactly how it was created. You know, the Clinton campaign funded it, but how did they fund it? That should be talked about a lot more. Who is Christopher Steele? That really hasn't been discussed enough in the public narrative. And each one of the individual things in that dossier should be taken up and should be put on full blast and everywhere. And the next phase from there now is, you've said, okay, you've gotten all this bad information. Well, this is what we're actually doing. But the problem is, we allowed them to set the game board, and we were just continually fighting back about what was happening. But we did not go directly at those charges and those things that were levied out there and showed exactly how they were false. You have to do that. You have to overwhelm with data, things that can be cited, things that are factual, and more reports on the people. And sure, there were individual people that were looking into it somewhat. Like I know Bongino did a lot of work on it, specifically on the Steele dossier, but there was not enough overwhelming in large places. They should be buying billboards. They should be doing anything that they can do so that people cannot get away from the truth. You have to overwhelm when something like that happens.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I've got a chapter in my book that's coming out in October titled Overwhelm the Overwhelmed. And that's exactly what you're talking about. You have to overwhelm the falsehoods because they're powered by all of this media and the government itself. Even our own tax dollars are working against us. So you have to work to overwhelm that with more truth, more facts, over and over and over again in a repetitive way, kind of like a machine gun, Wib. One of the ways to render safe cluster munitions for EOD back in the day was to use a 20 millimeter chain gun at a distance and shoot the things. That's what you have to do. Well, Jeremy, we got to. Sorry to go on to the military side with you, but we have to do that every once in a while.
My depth there, Colonel.
We've got to take our one more break. When we come back, though, we're going to talk about West Point. You're going to see a little clip. News just broke yesterday about this individual being given a significant, prestigious chair at West Point that should never have happened. We'll be right back with Jeremy Ryan Slate.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work. Try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.
West Point. Earlier this week, West Point announced that it was giving former CISA Director Jen Easterly a promotion to an appointment inside the Department of Social Sciences. This McDermott chair is for distinguished private individuals and also former government officials to liaise with cadets and give them advice as they set out into the world after they spend their time at West Point. Far-right activist Laura Loomer saw that West Point had made this announcement and put out a tweet saying that she did not approve of Easterly's appointment because of her work, particularly work in disinformation during her time as CISA director. By Wednesday morning, the Secretary of the Army issued a memorandum that pulled the appointment away from Easterly and said that West Point was going to look at how they put people into place in these positions moving forward. This has stirred up a lot of controversy because this makes now 2 for 2 when it comes to former CISA directors earning the ire of the Trump administration. If you remember earlier this year, former CISA director Chris Krebs was pulled from a security clearance by the Trump administration. And now we have it 2 for 2 in that Jen Easterly is not going to be in this position at West Point. For more on this story, check out cyberscoop.com.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. And, the narrative of lies is falling apart. So we as the American people, we have a chance to rebuild the real America. And the reason it's falling apart, the lies is because of you and people like you that have found shows like this. And like my guests today, Jeremy Ryan Slate, who is a show host in his own right, has some great shows. As a matter of fact, you can find it if you find my retweet of his show where I spent 10 minutes with him. It's a 10-minute clip that I reshared today from 2023. There's a link to his show and his X account right there. And Jeremy, I had to talk about this with you because it gets to the school system. And we've talked extensively, and I know you've talked to many, many others and researched this too, and have looked at it. The school system is really the foundational infiltrator of Maoism, the American-style Maoism, into all of our institutions. And we came dangerously close. If people listen to how I describe the DOD, we came dangerously close to being 100% infiltrated, and we have a long ways to go to fix things. But this West Point professorship, this chairmanship, now let's talk about who Jen Easterly is. She's the former head of CISA, and is seen on video talking about
wasn't CISA the one that
Trump
said the
didn't win the
most
election.
secure election?
Yeah, that was Krebs that said that. And then she was the follow-up, and she hates Donald Trump. She should not be in a Trump administration at all. She was a Biden appointee. She was in the Army, did propaganda and disinformation operations in the Army, and was running CISA as a disinformation operation, essentially. And they caught her. Now, what happened yesterday afternoon is the Secretary of the Army got wind of this by a bunch of old colonels tweeting at him and emailing him and calling him, I'm sure, because I was one of them. And he put a letter out saying she is not going to get that position. And we're, by the way, not going to let non-government organizations hire people for our military academies. Now, that surprised me. I've been working with military academies, the Air Force Academy, for several years now to get the CRT and all that transgender stuff, the Marxism out of the curriculum for several years now. I was not aware the service academies actually use NGOs to hire and vet their people. And apparently that's what happened.
Well, that would be a big security risk, in my opinion, right? Like, why would you have someone outside of your organization when it's an organization that's that important to how things work hiring for you? Because that can change your entire ideology. And this is something that, to go back to James Lindsay, he's talked about colleges of education for a very long time and how ruined they've been by the ideology of people like Paulo Freire, where we're not looking at a math problem, right? He gives James Lindsay gives the example of Billy went to the amusement park. He lives X number of miles away. He was going X speed. How long did it take him to get there? And the teacher would want to know, well, what was his class? And, does everybody get to go to the amusement park? Like things that don't have to do with the actual solution of the math problem. And that's a dumbing down of our civilization. If you look at going back to the Roman Empire, the reason that so many things were able to be done by the wealthy that were not to the liking of the general population is they only had a 5% literacy rate, sometimes as high as 10% literacy rate. So when you remove literacy, people are much easier to control. They lose their critical thinking skills. And that is how you can not just take over, but you can dominate an entire country or an entire empire, is by changing education and taking away the ability to critically think and look at things in such a way that you're going to question them.
Yeah, isn't that one of the things in the Cultural Revolution under Mao's China? Isn't that one of the things they did? They had I seem to remember a couple of things. One, children of teachers and professors being told, "Hey, you can't be part of the good group unless you openly oppose and shame your parents that are in these jobs." And then in other ways, they did this. They did that to clean out their universities and their primary and secondary education school systems of any teachers that might not be signing up to Maoism. That's one of the ways they did that, right?
Well, that's correct. And if you look at the Soviet Union, they did similar things. You'd have neighbors turning in neighbors, children turning in their parents, and it's interesting as well because if you look at the people that get empowered by this, they're people that in their regular lives don't have any power. So they love the idea that they have control and power over someone else. And that is a scary thing because you find out that those are people that should not have power. And that is why a cultural revolution or a Marxist revolution works so well, because you're taking people that feel like they don't have mobility or power somewhere in their life, and you're giving them power over everyone if they just buy into the vision that you are giving them. And that is a very, very scary thing. We look at the mask wearers. We look at the people that were pushing vaccinations. We look at the people that were pushing 6 feet apart and all of these things. They were willing to do it because this gave them a new power, a new thing they could use against others and use to control others. And that is what this type of a revolution will capitalize on.
Wow. Here's the other interesting thing about this situation with Jen Easterly is the reason why the veterans found out about it is that the dean of the U.S. Military Academy, which is a general, tweeted out how happy he was that she had gotten this chair.
Wow.
That gets back to our discussion earlier in the show about just how far along the Department of Defense institutions are with this infestation of Maoist Marxism. That's where we're at here. I was asked about that guy, and I said, well, maybe the Secretary of the Army needs to do a review of all the general officers, especially the ones at the U.S. Military Academy, if they're that happy that this Marxist is being able to get a position when Donald Trump's president of the United States. That's a big deal.
No, it absolutely is. And I guess the problem that you have there, Colonel, is and this is the thing you have to balance, is we need to fix these organizations, but also not end up in some sort of a Spanish Inquisition either, right? So it's because then that also creates a bad PR narrative in the public sphere. So it's a very interesting balancing act of figuring out how do you remove these people from these positions and put in the correct people without seeming like you're kind of committing a mass cleansing in ways. And that is the real balancing act, because everything is public relations and you have to think about how does what I'm doing look and how is what I'm doing perceived. So it's a very hard balancing act.
And that's where the United States and the people of the United States that we're talking to today, the regular Americans, we need to insist that we take the path that Rome didn't take, because that's what led Rome down to the failure of its empire, really, in my opinion, is this growing power base that just kept retribution after retribution after retribution, generation after generation for hundreds of years. We can't allow that to happen. But at the same time, there's a big discussion happening inside DOD right now about holding generals and admirals accountable for the unlawful implementation of the COVID vaccine order, which turned out the Secretary of Defense has declared was unlawful. The way it was implemented was unlawful, but not one general or admiral has been held accountable yet for that. So we've got to find a way to have true accountability without doing, I'll use the colloquial phrase, witch hunt type of thing, or inquisition like you talked about. It can't go there. And I think I'll take it back to before I let you close, Jeremy, I'll take it back to what you said earlier in the show. And that is that we need to find a way to prevent what happened with Rome, like Augustus being demonized by another part of the government. We need to find a way to prevent that and the search for accountability in the right way by following the laws that were broken against us.
Yes.
Following the Constitution that was broken against us is the right way to go. But we have to be firm in our decision to apply the law, especially criminally. Am I close to being on the right track there?
Well, you're close, and I think this is what it comes down to: is you have to apply the law to the letter of the law to everyone equally, and you can't be someone that because if you look at these communist regimes, and you're even looking at how the left has operated in the last few years, they then they pass laws they can then use against others. Well, that's seen as retribution, and that's a real problem. You need to take the laws that are already on the books and apply them equally to everyone, to the letter of the law. And when you do that, and when you show that level of fairness, I think that is the correct application of it. Anything other than that, you are breaking down the system that is in front of you.
Yeah. Well, my friend, thank you so much for coming on the show and spending this time with us. Again, it was short notice, so I really appreciate it. This is a very important topic. I really appreciate you coming on. Tell folks where they can find you and everything in the last 30 seconds here.
Yeah, so my company is Command Your Brand. We help CEOs and founders to appear on the right podcasts, and I don't want to see people's empires decline and fall like Rome, so you can check us out over at commandyourempire.com. And there's a great white paper over there about how you can continue to command and grow your empire. I'm also on YouTube. I have 2 different channels, Jeremy Roman Empire, where we cover the Roman Empire, and the Jeremy Ryan Slate Show. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. We appreciate it. God bless you. Stay in the fight, folks. Stay in the fight. All right, Monday, More War Monday. We'll be talking to Chad Caton, who was involved in a very important national security strategy conference led by General Mike Flynn last week. So we're going to talk about internal warfare inside the United States from the perspective of that conference. Chad Caton on More War Monday.
True beauty isn't applied. It's nourished from within. Bella Grace Elixir, a luxurious, scientifically crafted blend designed to restore radiance, vitality, and strength at a cellular level. At the heart of Bella Grace Elixir lies cat's claw, a powerful herb from the Amazon known for its ability to control